I was never supposed to be the one. Not the daughter with the loud voice, not the cousin with the thriving business, and definitely not the one anyone noticed at dinner. So when my cousin Joel raised his glass and sneered across the table, "How does it feel to be the most useless one here?" I was supposed to laugh it off, right? They all laughed. But I didn't flinch. I smiled, set down my glass, and said, "How does it feel when this useless one walks away with the receipts?" The room fell silent. They didn't know that behind my quiet demeanor were ledgers, records, and months of silent support. But they were about to find out. That night changed everything, because I stopped being the one they could ignore and started becoming the one they'd regret underestimating. I was already on edge when I walked into my aunt's dining room. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and polished wood everything staged for the annual family dinner. My parents were already seated, talking to Uncle Gary. My cousin Joel was at the head of the table, loud and booming like always, his booming voice filling every inch of the space. His wife sat next to him, laughing at everything he said like it was charming and not exhausting. I found my seat near the end, quiet, as usual. That's always been my role: a polite, observant, invisible when necessary. I wasn't the one who made grand entrances or delivered clever toasts. I was the one who stayed late to clean up when everyone had gone home. Dinner began with small talk. Promotions, baby announcements, beach houses, the usual things that get passed around in well-dressed circles. I wasn't jealous. I was used to it. But something in Joel's tone that night was different, sharper, crueler. It happened between dessert and the second round of wine. Joel raised his glass, swirling it like he was about to propose a toast. Instead, he leaned forward with a smug grin and said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "So, Madison, how does it feel to be the most useless one here?" Silence hit for half a second. Then laughter exploded. His wife, my parents, even my aunt covered her mouth in mock surprise. It wasn't just a joke to Theme, it was true. That's what stung most. I glanced around the table. No one looked uncomfortable. No one stepped in. My own mother smiled awkwardly, like this was just family fun. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Joel chuckled, slapping the table. "No offense," he added, as if that made it better. "But hey, some people build things. Some people do taxes." I felt heat rise to my neck, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled, set my fork down gently, folded my napkin, and said, "How does it feel when this useless one walks away with the receipts?" The room snapped to silence. Utter, suspended, frozen silence. Joel blinked. His smirk collapsed like a sandcastle under a wave. My mother turned red. My uncle coughed into his hand. Joel's wife's eyes darted around, looking for someone willing to break the tension. No one did. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping behind me like a siren. "Enjoy dessert," I said, calm and even. Then I walked out, leaving behind a room full of open mouths and unspoken questions. I didn't go home right after that dinner. I drove, windows down, air sharp against my skin. The silence in the car was louder than the laughter I'd left behind. Joel's voice still rang in my ears. How does it feel to be the most useless one here? But he didn't know. None of them knew. They didn't know that I was 17 the first time I paid off someone else's debt. My Aunt Joel's mom called me crying about a medical bill, said she didn't know who else to call. I'd just started working part-time as a bookkeeper for a local tax firm, barely making enough to cover gas and community college tuition. But I transferred $600 anyway, quietly. No questions. No thanks. It became a pattern. Uncle Gary's business account, overdrawn. I fixed it. Joel's younger brother wanted to apply to grad school and needed a loan cosigner. Guess who signed? By the time I was 25, my email inbox was a rotating door of financial emergencies disguised as casual check-ins. "Hey, Madison, just wondering, any chance you could look at this bill? Mad, you're so good with numbers. Could you maybe move some things around for me?" They always made it sound like I was doing a crossword puzzle, like saving them from late fees, overdraft penalties, and mounting interest was just a quirky talent I had. Not once did any of them ask how I was doing. No one cared about the overtime hours, the unpaid vacation days, or the nights I cried alone because my own rent was late after helping someone else. But I kept doing it, because for years, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would earn me a seat at the table. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. I thought one day someone would say, We wouldn't have made it without you, Madison. But that day never came. Instead, I became the financial skeleton in the family closet. Useful, but invisible. Called upon only when something cracked. And when I patched its silence. I started keeping records. Not for revenge. At first, it was just for organization. Excel sheets, dates, transfers. Memos like, covered April mortgage for mom and dad, 1-300, or, Joel, business taxes filed plus penalty waived. Over time, those spreadsheets became my quiet ledger of sacrifice. They thought I was just the quiet one, the single one, the background cousin. But behind the scenes, I was the damn foundation. And that night, when Joel mocked me in front of everyone, I realized something. The only thing more dangerous than someone underestimated is someone with receipts. The next morning, I opened my laptop and stared at the numbers that actually mattered. Not the petty digs from my cousin. Not the faces frozen in shock when I walked out. These numbers were mine. My dashboard lit up with graphs, portfolios, and client dashboards. I wasn't just someone who did taxes. I was a certified forensic accountant, specializing in financial cleanups for companies on the brink of audit disasters. If a startup had a money trail so messy the IRS couldn't untangle it, I was the one they called. I'd worked with everyone from busted restaurant chains to shady digital platforms that had no idea how to handle tax exposure. And I never bragged about it. Because while Joel was flashing new watches and pretending to be a CEO, I was quietly making 6 figures in retainer. Not a penny of it came from luck. It came from hard-earned skill and silence. I'd grown up watching my parents struggle, watching my mother write checks with shaking hands and my father pretend he wasn't worried when he clearly was. By 12, I taught myself Excel. By 15, I was balancing the family budget better than either of them. That wasn't ambition, that was survival. But somewhere along the way, I realized I could turn it into something more. By the time I was 23, I had 3 certifications, a network of clients across 4 states, and an apartment I paid for in full, no loans. No roommates, no noise. I didn't flaunt it because I didn't need to. But the joke was, I was never actually trying to impress them. I didn't care about proving myself to Joel or my parents. I cared about being useful to a fault. That was my flaw. I gave too much and asked for too little. I made their problems disappear, hoping they'd see me as something more than the quiet cousin who files taxes. But in their eyes, I was background noise. Support staff for their dysfunction. And the truth is, I enabled it. Because I wanted to be needed. That was the real reason I kept giving. Not just love, but fear. Fear that if I stopped helping, I'd disappear entirely from their world. But now, I wasn't afraid anymore. Not after what Joel said. Not after the silence that followed. That night taught me something simple and brutal. If the people closest to you only see your worth when you're useful, then it's time to stop being useful to them. And I wasn't done yet. I pulled up the folder I had quietly labeled Family Liability. Every receipt, every transfer, every wire, every bailout. It was time to turn the quiet into power. 3 days after the dinner, the text came. Joel, 1:14 p.m. Hey Maddie, can we talk? Just us. Need your advice on something. Advice. That was his code word for, I need your money but I don't want to say it outright. I didn't reply. By 3 p.m. he was calling. I let it ring twice and then picked up. His voice came on fast, friendly, overly cheerful, like the dinner never happened. Hey, been thinking about what you said the other night. Strong stuff. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. Listen, this is a little embarrassing, but I could use your help. The store's in a bit of a tight spot. There it was. Joel ran a boutique tech and lifestyle store in town. Fancy words for an over-leveraged retail space that had been bleeding money for years. I'd warned him about it 2 tax seasons ago, but he dismissed my analysis with a wave of the hand and a, you always worry too much. Now here he was. Suppliers are late, inventory's stuck. I just need a little boost to keep things moving, he continued. Define a little, I said flatly. 50,000, he said too quickly. I blinked. $50,000, he repeated, as if saying it again would make it sound less absurd. Come on, Maddie, you know how this works. Just bridge me till Q2. I'll pay you back in full, with interest. I almost laughed. You want me to fund the same business you bragged about while calling me useless? Silence. That's not what I meant, he muttered. But you said it, I replied. And so did everyone else. You meant it just fine. He tried again. Look, I messed up, okay? I was joking. You know how we all mess around. But you've always been the rock. You don't let things fall apart. There it was, the soft manipulation wrapped in flattery. But I wasn't falling for it this time. I used to think that was a compliment, I said. Now I know it's just your excuse to never grow up. He went quiet again. Then, you're really gonna let me fail? I smiled to myself. No, Joel, you did that all by yourself. I just finally stepped out of the way. Click. I hung up. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. I walked to the window, sunlight catching the corner of my vision. Joel's mask had slipped and it wasn't just desperation I saw behind it. It was the panic of someone who finally realized the useless one was the one holding the entire house together. And she'd just let go. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious. Because I was focused. Laser focused. By 10 p.m., I was sitting at my kitchen table with 2 laptops open, 3 folders spread across the wood, and years of digital receipts queued for printing. Bank statements. Transfer confirmations. Invoices I'd paid for other people's businesses, Joel's included. Payment history on my parents' overdue mortgage 3 winters ago. The tuition deposits for Joel's oldest son, 8,000 per semester for 2 years straight. Not from a shared fund. Not from a loan. From my personal account. And every time I hit print, I felt a layer of silence inside me peel away. I used to keep this record because I thought someday someone in the family would want to know. Maybe even thank me. Now I realized it was my armor. I printed the email where Joel begged me to make some numbers disappear during his last tax audit. I dug up the spreadsheet labeled Family Support 2016-2022, a meticulous timeline of every act of generosity I'd quietly handed out like candy. At 1:42 a.m., I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a legal folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside was the agreement Joel and I had signed in 2017, the one where I invested 30 into his business in exchange for 49% ownership. He laughed at the time, said, "Sure, whatever makes it official." I had it notarized anyway. That copy still had the ink from his signature. I placed it gently on top of the stack. And I whispered to myself, not invisible, not anymore. They had built an entire story around me. Madison, the single one, the quiet one, the one who'd never quite found her footing. They never asked how I always had enough money, never asked why I worked so much. They didn't want to know. Because knowing meant acknowledging how much they owed. But I wasn't collecting debts, not in the way they feared. I didn't want their money. I wanted the truth laid bare. I wanted the next time they said something cruel to feel the weight of every receipt, every line item, every ounce of unpaid labor I had poured into their lives. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning a reckoning. Because truth, when fully documented and organized in labeled folders, isn't cruel. It's liberation. The air was thick the moment I stepped into my parents' house. It was Saturday afternoon. The living room looked exactly the same as it had for 20 years: floral couch cushions, outdated framed photos, that same tick of the clock above the mantel. But something felt different this time. Because I wasn't coming over as the helper. I was coming as the ledger. Joel sat on the armrest, legs sprawled out, acting relaxed, but his eyes darted to the folder under my arm like it was a live grenade. My mom clutched a mug of tea, her fingers trembling slightly. Dad stood near the window with arms crossed. His silence was already an answer. I sat down on the couch, placed the thick folder on the coffee table, and looked each of them in the eye. "I didn't come here to argue," I said quietly. "I came here so you'd see." No one moved. I flipped the folder open, revealing labeled sections, each with color-coded tabs. Tuition. Medical. Mortgage. Joel's store. Business transfers. Ownership contracts. 2017 tax filing support. Emergency bailouts. My mom blinked hard. Joel shifted in his seat. My dad didn't even look down. "This," I said, tapping a stack of documents, "is every dollar I've quietly handed over in the last 10 years. Not out of obligation, out of love, but also out of fear. Joel scoffed. Fear? Of what? We didn't force you. No, I said calmly. You just never said thank you, never acknowledged it. You let me carry the weight so you wouldn't have to notice it existed. My mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I continued. Joel, that store you claim is yours. You wouldn't have survived 2017 without me. You signed this. I slid the notarized contract across the table. Joel stared at it like it might bite. You gave me 49% ownership in exchange for the 30 I wired to save you from collapse. You said it was just paperwork. Well, it wasn't. He said nothing. I turned to my father. You always called me independent. But you meant invisible. When the mortgage was about to default, who sent the $4,800 to cover it? I did. Without a word. My mother's eyes were glassy now. This isn't revenge, I said, my voice cracking slightly. This is clarity. I'm not angry that I helped you. I'm angry that you made me feel like I never did. Silence. Then my mom whispered, We didn't know. You didn't want to, I said, because it was easier to laugh at me and call me useless than admit I've been holding the cracks together. I stood. I don't need an apology, I said, but from now on you will see me. I closed the folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door. My heels echoed off the old wooden floor as I passed the room where I once wrapped Christmas gifts with Joel's kids. At the doorway, I paused. Next time you want to call someone useless, I said without turning back, make sure you're not living on their grace. Then I left. The email hit my inbox at 9:16 a.m., 3 days after I left my parents' house. Subject: Notice of intent to pursue legal action. For a split second, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the name, Miller, Hartley LLP, Joel's attorney. I opened it. A 5-page letter accusing me of fraudulent inducement in the 2017 contract. Joel claimed I coerced him into signing the agreement while he was emotionally distressed and financially uninformed. They demanded I forfeit my 49% ownership of his business within 7 days or face a lawsuit. I let out a dry laugh. So this was it. Joel hadn't just refused to take responsibility, he was trying to erase me entirely. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I grabbed the folder, the same one I'd laid on my parents' table, and drove straight to the law office of someone who didn't laugh at my job. Cynthia Raines, my longtime client and friend, now a corporate attorney with her own firm. She met me in a glass-walled conference room, scanning the documents silently while I poured it all out. The emails, the bank transfers, the notarized contract. When I finished, she looked up with fire in her eyes. This is airtight, Madison. They've got nothing but desperation and a bruised ego. Still, I knew lawsuits weren't about truth alone. They were about leverage, reputation, pressure. He thinks I'll fold, I said. Then don't, Cynthia replied. Let's make this public. If they want to fight, we give them a war clean, professional, and factual. You've got receipts? We turn them into armor. That night, I opened my laptop again, not to do client work, but to defend myself. I documented everything. I reprinted timelines. I compiled emails where Joel thanked me for saving his ass. I found the PayPal receipts for his suppliers. The messages where he'd written, "You're a lifesaver, Maddie. I owe you everything." I took screenshots of every single one. By the time I closed the laptop, I wasn't scared. I was furiously focused. This wasn't just about shares. It was about rewriting the story Joel had tried to bury me under. And it was about telling every woman who ever sacrificed silently, no more. Joel thought he could silence me by dragging me into court. What he didn't realize was I wasn't the one on trial. He was. And I had the truth on my side, printed, signed, and ready. The courtroom was quiet. Cool air, neutral walls. A judge who didn't flinch at drama-only facts. Joel sat across the aisle, arms folded, jaw tense. He wouldn't look at me. His lawyer flipped nervously through documents like they were hoping something might magically rewrite history. I sat with Cynthia beside me, the folder in my lap. Not shaking, not angry, just resolved. This was no longer about vengeance. It was about recognition. Of who I was. Of what I'd done. Of the truth. Cynthia laid out the case with surgical clarity. Notarized contract signed willingly in 2017. Proof of 30 wired into Joel's business account. Emails of gratitude. No evidence of coercion. Joel's attorney stammered about family confusion, informal understandings, and emotional manipulation. The judge's brow barely moved. When the ruling came, it was swift. The court finds the contract valid and binding. The defendant, Madison Blake, retains her 49% ownership. The claim of fraudulent inducement is dismissed in full. I closed my eyes for a moment. Let the words wash over me. Joel's lawyer sank in his seat. Joel exhaled like he'd just swallowed sand. I stood, calm, and gathered my things. Outside the courthouse, Cynthia hugged me. You stood your ground, Madison. It's over. But she was wrong. Something deeper had just begun. Back at my apartment, I sat in the soft afternoon light filtering through the blinds. My phone buzzed again, a message from my mother. Please come to dinner. We miss you. Let's make things right. I stared at the screen, not out of anger, not even hurt, just clarity. I typed back slowly. I didn't go to war to burn bridges. I went to be seen. I hope someday you all can, but until then, I need peace. Then I turned the phone over. That weekend, I donated the spreadsheet I'd created stripped of Namesto, a nonprofit that helped women financially disentangle themselves from toxic family dynamics. They invited me to speak at their next conference. I said yes. Because for years, I had been the one fixing problems, quietly, invisibly. Now, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a woman who owned 49% of a company that once tried to erase her. A woman who walked out of the courtroom not just with shares but with something infinitely more powerful. Her voice. And I was going to use it not to shame, but to shine. To lift up the ones still trapped in silence. To tell them, you are not useless, you are the foundation. And the day you stop carrying everyone else is the day you begin to carry yourself. Madison's story reminds us of a quiet truth rooted deep in God's word. Sometimes, the ones who give the most are the ones seen the least. For years, she served her family in silence, giving, supporting, sacrificing, yet they mocked her as useless. But just as in Luke 12:3, where it says, "What is whispered in the inner rooms shall be proclaimed upon the housetops," her truth eventually spoke louder than their laughter. To those in the older generation who have poured their hearts into others, children, family, community, and feel unseen or unappreciated, God sees. Your labor is never in vain when done in love. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Like Madison, there comes a time to speak truth not in anger, but in clarity, to reclaim your worth not with pride, but with peace. Let her story be a reminder. Your quiet strength matters. You are not forgotten. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your story and remind you, you are still seen, you are still valued, you are still deeply loved.